I'm so glad to be able to spend a few moments with you. I'm looking at the timer. Thank you very kindly. And I'd like to give Daniel a round of applause. A wonderful introduction, Daniel. You are influencers, you are leaders, and so I'm speaking to the choir, so I want to make this clear. Everything that I'm going to say, you already know it. That's number one. I don't want to insult your intelligence. Number two, everything I'm going to say, you've heard it before. And three, I don't want you to agree with me, and I don't want you to believe me. I don't believe any of this stuff myself. I know it. And the fourth thing is, just be open. How many of you have a story that you'd like to make a difference with? Raise your hands, please. How many of you have a story that you would like to earn money with? Raise your hands, please. Very good. So I want to share with you some things that I've learned over the years. How many of you like to make a greater impact with your presentation? Raise your hands. Now, I saw your presentation. And I learned a lot last night, and I saw the presentation of the gentleman, the doctor from Detroit, Dr. Partha, what's his name? Andy. And Dr. Andy? Nandi. I learned from him. So I'm always learning. I'm always listening. I'm always learning. And so to me, if you want to be a great presenter, you see yourself as a perpetual student. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too young to teach. And so I'm always learning. I was at an event, and Peter Anthony was there, and Peter gave a riveting presentation, not the one I saw on stage, but when I saw him on the telephone. And I learned a lot during that conversation. And so here's something I would like to suggest to you. How many of you like to have a greater national impact? Raise your hands, please. How many of you like to have a global impact? Raise your hands. Very good. Now, I've spoken to over 51 countries. I just had 17 speaking requests from 17 different countries, and I turned them down. Because when I speak internationally, I earn $225,000 an hour. And the reason I turned them down is I'm a 21-year cancer conqueror because of God's grace and mercy. And so there's no price that I can put on my health. That I did a presentation just a few weeks ago from Cleveland Clinic. They were giving me what they said palliative care because the exam showed that cancer had metastasized to my spine. And so I went in the bathroom, I looked, and there was an X here and an X here. So I asked the nurse, I said, why do you put this X up here? Well, we're going in, cancer's metastasized to your spine, so the procedure we're going to do, that you might not be able to speak. I said, are you kidding me? No, you might lose your voice. I said, is that right? So I called all my kids and talked to them, make a long story short, and I was there thinking, I said, this might be the last time that anyone will hear my voice. I took my phone out, and now here I'm in my gown, medical instruments going off, and I gave an hour-and-a-half motivational speech from my hospital bed. Nurses coming in, giving me a shot, the whole works, all right? So, in fact, you can Google it later, called Les Brown Speaking from His Hospital Bed. A guy called me and said, who in the hell does that? I said, hey. I told my kids, they say I'm dead. I said, don't let them bury me for 3 days. What I want them to do is come down to the morgue and put a microphone in my hand. If I don't grab it and say, you got to be hungry. Say, Dad is gone now. He's gone now, all right? So what I want to do is condense here several things. Number one, become clear about what your message is. I listened to Daniel, and Daniel, we asked the question last night, what's the most difficult situation that you've faced and how did you deal with it? Now, in that, I was listening to everybody's presentations. In that, I heard a lot of great speeches last night. Your voice, your story has value. Write this down. You have an energy signature. There are some people that when I speak, there's something about me that they're going to identify with, just like when Daniel heard my voice. But there are some people that when they hear Peter Anthony's voice, or when they hear Roger's voice, or when they hear Teresa's voice, that they're going to respond, or when they hear your voice, because of who you are behind the words that you speak. There's some people, Dr. Stan, that when you speak, it's going to be a transformative moment. So you want to be clear about what your message is. Now, I heard Daniel speak today, and he told a story that grabbed me. So I'm going to tell the story in the context, and I want you to write this down. Create special moments. Create special moments. I was at lunch with a friend named Daniel, and he used to work for Best Buy. And he talked about the fact that he got all of his employees together, over 200, to interview them. Everybody, let us say together, defining moment. Defining moment. Together, please, defining moment. Defining moment. And so that what Daniel said, that one of the employees, Dr. Stan, was a defining moment for him. That this guy at one time was a doctor. And here he was working under Daniel for $8 an hour. So Daniel said, You a doctor? No, he's a lawyer, right? You a lawyer? Yes. But in your country, sir, my being a lawyer in your country means nothing. But what happened in that moment, that was a defining moment for Daniel. Daniel said, no, you still have that kind of value. And so, but what happened for Daniel, he saw himself in that person unless he had made a decision that his life was going to be different. And even though he had a good position, he had good stock, but that was not his passion. Everybody, let us say together, live your passion. Live your passion. See, I believe that you were not born to work for a living, but to live your making. And living your making will make your living. And that's where Daniel was. That's why that was a defining moment. There's a movie by Denzel Washington said there are moments in life, there's before this and there's after this, and after this nothing will ever be the same again. And he couldn't rest, and he resigned. And the people there said, come on, man, we have another position for you. He says, no, I can't do this anymore. Marion White said, in life, there are moments in life that when you don't have enough courage or insight to know that you have outgrown a situation and it's time to move on, life will move on you, Don. And in that moment, Daniel had the courage to move on. How many of you have ever seen people in a situation that they had outgrown, but they didn't have the courage to move on? Raise your hands, please. Yes. Now, let me pause. That was a defining moment. You want to have presentations that create defining moments that people connect with. I want to know, as I share that story, tell me, what did you experience that I shared this story? Anybody? Raise your hands. Tell me what went through your mind when I shared that story. Yes.
A shift in energy.
A shift in energy? No, but what about the story? Oh, yes, of course, the shift in my energy, yes. That's major, yes, go ahead.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, this
yes.
had a serious effect. I imagine that energy that he felt had something that maybe he would pay for.
Well, the thing is, when he looked at him and he saw himself and said, unless I make a decision today, that could be me. And I've got more stuff in me than what Best Buy is accommodating. There's some other things that I want to do with my life. Yes, how many of you have ever been in that situation? Raise your hands, please. Yes.
The story made me relate.
How so?
That are thinking of the defining moment in my life. That what was that Denzel Washington, that this...
There's the before this, and there's after this, and after this, nothing will ever be the same again. Now write this down. Create special moments that the audience can relate to. Because now so rather than you just telling a story, now they are part of the story, and now they're thinking about their story. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I have realized in life, and I saw a very good example of this, of a new friend of mine by the name of Nicole, let us say together, stand in your power. Stand in your power. She, at a young girl, she had made some decisions that worked against her, and everybody around her was trying to put pressure on her to do what they wanted her to do. There she was, a teenager, but she had courage. And she decided to stand in her power. She said, no. No, how many of you ever had a situation where people tried to get you to do something you didn't want to do, but you found it in yourself to say no to them? Raise your hands, you know what I'm talking about. Now, let me tell you why I asked the question. I asked the question for two reasons. One, I got you thinking about that event in your life. And two, I've got you physically involved. Now I've got you physically engaged in the participation. Write this down. Create an experience. When I came into the speaking industry was based upon Think and Grow Rich. The Bible of the speaking industry has some good information. If information could change people, everybody would be skinny, rich, and happy. People don't bring you in to give them information. They can Google the information. What will set you apart from other presenters is that you create an experience where you impact people individually and collectively in the audience, because the goal is, and write this down, to do three-dimensional storytelling. Three-dimensional storytelling. And so the reason why the experience is important, once you create an experience, the only way that human beings are transformed, you have to create a significant emotional event. What I found in the speaking industry has been hijacked. People are standing up speaking not to transform lives. How many want to transform lives? Raise your hands, please. What they're speaking to do is to get people to run to the back of the room. They speak to sell. I train to speak to transform lives. Write this down. Impact drives income and requests. If you make an impact with people, you will get more requests. The average speaker gets around, according to the National Speakers Association, 25 to 30 speaking requests a year. I get over 3,000 a year in the people that I've trained. Why? Because we transform their lives. Daniel remembered me because I said something that transformed his life. Does that make sense? And so the key is that the create an experience where you give a person a vision of themselves beyond their circumstances and their mental conditioning. See, we were born with greatness, but we've been programmed to fail. And so the key is to strip away what has been poured into us. That's why my favorite book says, be ye not conformed to this world, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's an ongoing process. And so when you speak, the goal is to impact the mind, touch the heart, because we are emotional beings, and to ignite the spirit, so that as a result of them being in your presence and hearing your story, that they become literally empowered because of your words, because of the impact of your speech, that they become like a pencil in the hand of God and start writing a new chapter with their lives. Now, here's the next thing that's important. Get a coach that's experienced and accomplished. When I used to go see Zig Ziglar and Dr. Norman Vincent Peale and Robert Schuller, Possibility Thinking, those guys, they mesmerized me. Zig Ziglar, if you give enough people what they want, they'll give you what you want. Jim Rohn, when the end comes for you, let it find you conquering a new mountain, not sliding down an old one. When I heard their voices, I was mesmerized. I was hanging on every word. And I'll never forget, I was at work, WVKO radio station in Columbus, Ohio, and Mike Williams said, "Hey, Brownie." I said, "What?" He said, "You know why you go see those guys?" I said, "Yeah, because I like the message." He says, "No, not just that." He said, "You like to help people." How many of you like to help people? Raise your hands, please. Now, there's two things. One, you have a story that you want people to relate to you. I ask you that question so that you can identify with the story that I'm going to tell. So write down, relate and identify. Relate and identify. So he said, "Hey man, that's who you are. You're always holding court around here because you like to help people. And you can do that, Brownie." I'll say, "Oh man, Mike, I could never do that. You know what my background is." He said, "Brownie, you can." And so I went home and I started thinking about it, because what I realized, that I was living out of my history rather than my imagination. See, Don, when I was in the 5th grade, I was labeled educable mentally retarded and put back from the 5th grade to the 4th grade, and I failed again in the 8th grade. I have no college training. But I met this teacher, Mr. Leroy Washington. I was in his class one day, and he said, young man, go to the board and work this problem out for me. I said, oh, sir, I can't do that. He said, why not? I'm not one of your students. I'm here to see MacArthur Stevens, sir. He said, look at me. I said, yes, sir. Yes, what is it? Go to the board and work the problem out anyhow. I said, I can't, sir. I can't. And the other students started laughing, saying, he's Leslie. He's got a twin brother, Wesley. Wesley's smart. He's DT. What's DT? He's a dumb twin. And they erupted in laughter. And I said, I am, sir. And he came from behind his desk and he looked at me. He said, don't you ever say that again. Someone's opinion of you does not have to become your reality. And on that day, he interrupted my vision of myself on that day. See, how we live our lives is a result of the story, Angel, that we believe about ourselves. And when you speak, that what we do is that you distract, dispute, and inspire. When you speak, you distract that person, Susan, from their story. And when you deliver your speech, you distract them not only from their story, but you dismantle their current belief system. Distract, dispute, and inspire. You inspire them to make new choices with their lives. And on that day, he looked at me with the eyes of Goethe, who said, look at a man the way that he is, he only becomes worse, but look at him as if he were what he could be, then he becomes what he should be. On that day, he gave me a different vision of myself. How many of you ever had someone that you cared about, someone that you respected, someone that you admired that spoke to you, and it had an impact on your life, and you were never the same again? Raise your hand if you know what I'm saying. And so as you speak, the goal is to create experience with the audience so that they become a part of the presentation and they get a computer that's working. It's okay. I'm going to point at you, you change it, all right? Thank you. Would you change it? Again, please. Again. Right there. So when I tell my story, and you don't have to have a down and out story. You don't even have to tell your story. How many of you ever heard of Marianne Williamson? Raise your hands, please. Marianne Williamson read the book A Course in Miracles. That book had a transformative impact on her life. So she wrote a book called Return to Love, which was about A Course in Miracles. And when you interview her, she will say, according to A Course in Miracles, because that's her Bible. So that's not her story. But to me, I encourage you to use your story as a tool to impact an audience. Why? Because a story has a human face. So when I talk about Nicole, who stood up to the family members and friends and stood her ground and refused, with the backing of her husband, refused to back down from the decision that she made, that she decided that what other people thought about her was none of her business. And that's what you had to do, Stan. You had to make a decision to be in a relationship where you were dying together rather than living together. And you decided, no, I'm not going out like this. And so as you look at yourself, look at your goals and dreams, just think about what is it in your life that calls for you to be courageous, to stand up inside yourself. When I talked to my friend and I said to him, Daniel, well, what did you do? What are the 3 qualities about yourself that allowed you to overcome that? And here's why I'm sharing this. As entrepreneurs, as leaders, as people of making impact, how many of you know when you have something you want to do that Murphy's Law is going to show up? Raise your hands, please. And if you don't know who Murphy's Law is, don't worry, he's waiting for you at the parking lot. Murphy's Law says if anything can happen, it will, and at the worst possible moment. And so what happens is that our careers and the things that we want to do is like getting on an airplane. When you get on an airplane, the first thing they tell us to do, fasten your seatbelts. Why? because you're going to experience some turbulence before you reach a comfortable altitude. And so Daniel had an event. And on that day, when he had this event for the Latino community, he just lost money. And the newspapers, they talked about him, and he could have given up. Write this down. Be tenacious. Be tenacious. Why? Because you're going to fail your way to success. You have to fasten your mental and emotional and psychological seatbelts, because you're going to fail your way to success. That's the name of the game. Walt Disney filed bankruptcy 7 times and had 2 nervous breakdowns. Walter P. Chrysler fell in the automobile industry 51 times. I had 3 people at my first seminar, and nobody could have predicted when they came and saw, and one potential investor, he looked around the room and saw 3 people there, plus Larry DeAngie, my cousin Boo, and myself, and he said, "You guys are really looking very prosperous right now." And he walked in and walked out. He turned around and he walked out. However, he did not know in my future. I've heard the saying, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has entered the heart of mankind what God has in store for you. In my future, because I was tenacious and did not give up, a major pharmaceutical company gave me a contract to train 3,500 doctors around the country. Novartis Pharmaceutical, $640,000. 1 month, Monday through Friday, 45 minutes, Monday through Thursday, 16 speeches, $640,000. I named the company. Everything can be verified. And what I'm saying to you, you have something special. You have greatness in you. Don't judge your situation based upon where you are. That there are things that you're going to do, lives that you're going to impact. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has entered the heart of mankind what God has in store for you if you are tenacious and if you stay the course. The next thing I said, tell me something else. Daniel, what else did you experience in that? And he said, courageous. You got to be courageous. Most people stop when they fail. 85% of people allow their fear of failure to stop them for their desire to succeed. I did. Mike Williams said, Brownie, you can do what those guys do. I said, come on, Mike. I can't compete with people with college degrees, PhDs, and MBAs. How many have ever had someone see something in you that you did not see in yourself? Raise your hands, please. And so I was suffering from possibility blindness. And I didn't do this for, and I'm embarrassed to say, 14 years, because I was living out of my history as opposed to my imagination. I want you to visualize what it is that you see for yourself and see it accomplished. Einstein said the imagination is the preview of what's to come. I'm going to pause right here. Share with me, what did you hear what I was doing as I walk you through this process? What are some of the things that you noticed in my presentation? Yes, Susan?
One of the things you use are names.
Yes.
So you're relating to each of us. You let us know we're known by you.
Good. Now, here's something I do that will give you an advantage. The speaking industry, to a very large extent, is governed by the Dale Carnegie course. They teach, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. How many of you have ever heard that? Raise your hands, please. Mike Williams, I want you to write this down. Mike Williams, the road to your best stuff. The road to your best stuff. He said, Brownie, 2 things. He says, 1, make yourself stand out. 2, he said, never assume and never let what you want to say get in the way of what your audience wants to hear. And all that getting, get understanding, Don. Okay? So, email me at lesbrown77@gmail.com. I'm going to send you a needs assessment. No one had done this. I went and interviewed a guy named Brian Buffini and Associates, one of the biggest, largest real estate companies on the planet. I send needs assessment out to all my clients, asking them, what is it you want? What is it that you want your audience to walk away with? What are the top 5 things? I send that to the CEO and the marketing director. And not only that, give me the names of your top 5 performers. And I go there early and I interview them. What do you attribute your success to? And I collect stories from them. And then I go out in the audience and I say, excuse me, what is your name? Oh, Dr. Stan, how are you? I'm speaking today. If you were in my position, tell me off the record, what are 3 things you feel that this audience needs to hear? Now, so what I've done is I've gotten information from the people who are writing the check. I've got information from the top performers. I've got stories that I can include in my presentation. And when I call their name and say, Don, everybody who knows you, Don, they say, he knows Don. Wow. And so when I'm looking around the room and I say, Gary, that was a great story you told me, that you've been with the company for 16 years, but you said when you come to work, it's not coming to work, it's coming to be with your family, and that because of the standards here and the culture here, you love being here because you feel that you are making a difference and you're making impact. Gary, thank you for that. I make Gary look good. Now the company feels good. Wow, Gary said some nice things about us. The CEO say, come to him and say, thank you for saying that, Gary. All right? So I've taken the time, Judy, to learn at least 7 to 10 people's names and collect their stories and use their stories to drive the company's point home. Not my point, the company's point. Am I making sense? What I'm saying? Guess what? They appreciate that. They value that. 98% of my speaking is repeat business and referral business. Does that make sense? Now, the other thing is, I talked to you about, next slide, please. Donald Trump and I did a tour together called Millionaires in Training. I remember he was lamenting, saying, you know, my father only gave me $14 million for my dream. How many of you have had $14 million? That would be your dream. You know, my mama gave us 2 pieces of sugar cane. Let me tell you something, I'm in here. So I made my first million in 3 years after I was on tour with him. 3 years. Now his father gave him 14 million. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, but I use a story about becoming a disc jockey. And the goal of the story is I illustrate you got to be hungry. You have a story. There are things you've gone through. And don't write this down, but just let this marinate with you. Get a coach. Why? Because you can't read the label if you're locked in the box. You can't read the label if you're locked in a box. The story you told me was riveting. That was a story, man, that I will remember that, and I will share that story with your permission. And so the reason you want someone who can see what you can't see. Michael Jordan is considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Never won a championship without Phil Jackson. Muhammad Ali said, I'm the greatest. Never won a championship without Angelo Dundee. You've got to have someone who's trained, who's accomplished, and who can see what you can't see, that can introduce you to a place to yourself, a person in yourself that you don't know right now. Next slide, please. So what I did, I invested in myself, and I hired this guy, Mike Williams, who wrote the book called The Road to Your Best Stuff. And Mike, boy, he is a hardcore dude. I'm Aquarius, he's a Virgo, he's an analyst. You know me? I'm ready, aim, fire. If you throw enough rice on the wall, some of it's going to stick. Mike, the Virgo, would say, why wall? Why not grits? Why not a roof? You know? I said, too many questions, man, too many questions. So Mike, I wrote the foreword for that book, and I'm so proud when his daughter, who's my goddaughter, called me to do that. I started crying. She said, why are you crying? I said, because if I didn't go to Champion Junior High School to hear your father speak, I would have died not knowing this Les Brown existed. And I'm so glad I went, and I'm so glad that we became friends, because he introduced me to a part of myself that I didn't know existed. I did not know. And I can share with you that you have greatness in you. And I want you to shake someone's hand on your right and left around the table and look them in the eyes and say sincerely, you have greatness in you. Do that right now, please. Yes, next slide, please. Next slide. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea whose hand you just shook. That hand you just shook. You have no idea who that person is going to become. This is Michael Jackson and Jackson 5. That's me in the back at 175 pounds. That was in 1973. I had no idea who those kids were going to become. They had no idea who I was going to become. Next slide, please. And so this young man became the greatest entertainer, in my opinion, in the history of the world. The young man who said he molested him 2 years ago came clean after his father committed suicide and said, I lied. My father drilled me to lie so that he could sue Michael Jackson and get millions of dollars. And they settled millions of dollars out of court. He said, Michael Jackson never touched me. I lied. My father made me lie. Isn't that something? And people thought this guy was a molester. He just loved kids. He just loved kids. But his father made him do it. And after his father committed suicide, he came clean, told the truth. Next slide, please. Your ability to, how many like to make a difference in your community? Raise your hands. Your ability to communicate and tell your story effectively will allow you to do that. I ran for the Ohio legislature. Mike gave me a larger vision of myself, and I wanted to make a difference in the community. I passed 14 bills my first term, and I ran against an incumbent in a district 65% white, 22-year incumbent. 3 attorneys ran against him and lost. And here's something that I realized. Use a story that people can identify with. My opponent had the endorsement of the newspapers of all the African American leaders. He had over $75,000. I had $650. I came to the radio station on a Friday afternoon, and Harsh Perkins, a guy who knew me at the radio station because they had fired me for being controversial and doing editorials, and he said, what are you going to do with $650, Brownie? I said, just let me in the control room and I'll show you. And I used to talk about my mother on the air, and I called my mother. I said, Mama, I'm running for state representative. She said, Leslie, what mess are you into now? I said, Mama, I'm running for state representative and I need your support. I don't need you to talk long, just speak from your heart. I'll give you $500. She said, okay, you better give me my damn money. I knew that would seal the deal, Roger. I knew it, Thomas, I knew it. So I said, okay, Mama, go ahead, start. She said, hello, this is Mrs. Mamie Brown. When I raised my boys, I raised them to be good boys. When they got out of hand, I beat their behinds. Please vote for my son, he's a good boy. I got 26,000 votes to his 3,000 votes. I won, hands down. So Einstein said, genius is the capacity to make the complicated simple. And that's what you did last night, Roger. That you took this concept and you made it very simple, very enjoyable, and engaging that I couldn't pull away. Next slide, please. And so I was elected the 3 terms, and then I resigned to go back to Miami to take care of my mother. The reason why it's important for you to know why you're doing what you're doing. Nietzsche said, if you know what the why for living, you can endure almost anyhow. I wanted to take care of my mother. She adopted me and 6 other kids. I was born in an abandoned building on a floor in a poor section of Miami, Florida. And when I was put back from the 5th grade to the 4th grade and failed again in the 8th grade, labeled educable mentally retarded, I never forget what my mother said. She only had a 3rd grade education. But when those teachers looked at me and looked at her and said, we need to put him back from the 5th grade to the 4th grade because he's educably mentally retarded, my mother said to her, in all due respect, Miss Carr, my boy's special. He's special. And when we left Mrs. Carr's classroom, my mother said to me constantly, don't pay any attention to them, Leslie. You're special. You're my baby. You're special. And she reminded me of that. How many of you ever had somebody who, in spite of what you've done, they saw your specialness? Raise your hands, please. And she made me feel special. Next slide, please. So part of making it today, not only your story. I used to have a talk show, and I would end it by saying, this has been Mrs. Mamie Brown's baby boy. And I'm going to end this on this, and why this occasion, this mastermind is important, because it gives you an opportunity to create partnerships. I never forget, I always wanted to be on stage with Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. I never forget when I opened for him, I was behind stage, and when I came to the auditorium, I knocked on the door, and they said, who are you? And I said, my name is Les Brown. They said, you're not the band leader. I said, no, I'm not. Well, who are you? I said, I'm Mrs. Mamie Brown's baby boy. Guy looked at me, his face got pale. He turned around and he called Dr. Peele's wife. He says, a guy here, he said, his name is Les Brown, and he's not the band leader. And Dr. Norman Vincent Peale heard him. He said, Les Brown? Can't be Les Brown. Shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. I said, sir, that's my quote. Dr. Peale, I sent that to you. He said, yes. I love that quote whenever I end my speeches. I ended with that. I thought you were the band leader who played with Bob Hope. I said, no, I'm not. And then a young speaker was in the dressing room with us, and he looked at Dr. Peale, who had a great sense of humor. He said, Dr. Peale, how old are you? He said, Sonny, I'm 92. Guy looked him up and down and said, I don't know if I want to live to be 92. He said, that's because you've never been 91. So I'm going to end there. I want you to write this down. I said, create an experience. Listen to the listening of the audience. And I will send you something on that. And then the other piece that's very important, be the message that you bring. Be the message. Don't just speak it, but let your life be an example of the message that you deliver, so that you are congruent, that this is not something you believe, this is something you know, because you're living an achievement-driven life. Now, you'd ask me some questions now. I'm finished. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me, please. Yes, Angel?
Thank you. When you have several stories to tell, how do you pick one?
You don't pick them. That's what your coach will help you to do, to position your stories, and then you get feedback from the audience. When I spoke in the Georgia Dome, and I want you to write this down, Les Brown speaking in the Georgia Dome, I'm speaking before 80,000 people. Now, I had already the title for the speech, and it was, It's Not Over Till You Win. That's what I felt. But the audience, when they came to the table, they said, I'm hungry. I want that story about when you were a disc jockey. How many ever bought an album for one song, and then you got the album, and there was something else on that album that you enjoyed more? And so I let my audience select my story. So when people say, I enjoyed you, I'll pause and ask them, excuse me, what did you enjoy about it? I ask them because I want to know, and that's what I want to load my presentation with, not what I want. I thought the story that I told about playing a game with my son, Connect 4, was a good story, but that was not the story they wanted. They wanted my signature story. Everybody repeat after me, please. You got to be hungry. You got to be hungry. Again, please. You got to be hungry. You got to be hungry. Mr. Washington said, young man, what do you want to do with your life? I said, sir, I want to be a disc jockey. I want to be able to take care of my mother, and I believe if I'm a disc jockey, I can earn enough money to do that. He said, you got to be hungry. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, people that are hungry are willing to do the things today others won't do in order to have the things tomorrow others won't have. People that are hungry, believe, always strive to get on top in life because it's the bottom that's overcrowded. I'm hungry, sir. I'm hungry to take care of my mother all my life. People compare me to my twin brother who's very smart, or my sister who graduated from the University of Miami. I'm hungry. He says, good. So you want to be a disc jockey? I said, yes, sir. He says, here are 3 things I want you to do. Here are my car keys. I said, what do you want me to do with this? He said, go to my car at 12 noon. A guy comes on the radio. His name is Paul Harvey. He's the world's greatest communicator. He said, you want to be a disc jockey? You want to study somebody who masters what it is you want to do. He said, study the masters, because he is a master telling a story and being a great communicator. I said, yes, sir. And here's something else. Here's a cassette tape. What is it, sir? The Strangest Secret in the World by Earl Nightingale. You don't get in life what you want, young man. You get in life what you are. This will retrain your thinking. He said, develop your communication skills by listening to Paul Harvey. Once you open your mouth, you tell the world who you are. And then he said, practice OQP. I said, OQP, what's that? Only quality people. You earn within $2,000 to $3,000 of your closest friends. He was absolutely right. I remember when I spoke in the Georgia Dome, that's the first time in 34 minutes I earned over $100,000. Then I went to the Seminar of the Century with T. Harv Eckert, and I saw Jay Abraham and Bob Proctor, and those guys earned over $700,000 in 90 minutes. And at that event, because I was in a different environment, I earned $410,000 in an hour and 30-minute presentation. Why? Because I saw other people doing it, and I said, if they can do it, I can do it. How many ever been in that kind of situation? Okay? And so he taught me the value of changing your relationships, upgrading your relationships. Dr. Dennis Kimbrough said, if you're the smartest one in your group, you need to get a new group. There's something else I'm doing at the points that I make. And write this down. Never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. Never make a point without a story, never tell a story without a point. And drill the point home deeper with quotes and statistics. And people, as a result of hearing you, they will know that you're well read and will see you as an authority. So if you notice, I pulled from movies and quotes. And so when I get up and I do it, people think, you know, they say, as Maya Angelou said, she said she used to get angry when people said she was a natural communicator. She said, show me a natural heart surgeon. They work at it. You know, I work at this. And I've been doing it for over 40 years, and I love it. And I didn't just come in here to speak. I prepared. I've been thinking about it. I've been asking questions and interviewing you and watching and observing all of you. Ask me another question, please, and I'll be on time. Yes.
How do you find the right coach?
Find someone who's speaking on the level that, no, they don't find you. You know, I found him because I admired how he spoke. And I said, look, would you work with me?